first saw you, I was like, who is this girl in the hat? Who does she think she is?
It's not like I won the lottery, y'all.
Exactly.
It's not like I married a prince.
And the amount of times people would comment on them. I just thought, are we like body shaming at 9 months old? Is this when it starts? They're laughing at me and they're thinking, this girl thinks she could write. She's not a real writer.
And they probably missed your email.
They missed my email. They don't care. He could not look me in the eye. He was shaking his head as if I had told him I had done this horrible thing. Just a few months ago, it seemed like a crazy idea. And in the back of my head, I thought, if you say no, I will call this wedding off.
On today's show, I'm talking with Miss Katie Cline. And y'all, I'm going to be honest with you. I was asked to be a speaker at an event in Phoenix, Arizona, and I was looking through the list of other speakers for ladies that I was interested in bringing on the podcast. And when I came across Katie's name, I wasn't initially familiar with who she was. And as I started digging through her content, I found that she was this really interesting woman who was using the skills that she had working for Michael Kors, working for some enormous hotel chains that had really great hospitality backgrounds, and she'd pulled that into building her own Airbnb business, which is really unique. We also talk about what it's like to buy your second home before you buy your first home because she lives in New York City. And I know a lot of you are in that situation where your market is just too expensive for you to invest in. We've got some really great tips coming up, so make sure you stick around for the whole thing. Welcome to the show, Katie.
Thank you. I'm so pleased to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. We happen to be at a conference together.
Yes.
I noticed that, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we got to do an interview really quick.
You were amazing yesterday, by the way.
Thank you.
You really
I appreciate that. I felt like the room was starting to fall asleep because I got the 3:30 time slot.
This is what I have today,
Okay.
the 3:30, and everyone's going to go for coffee
Right,
and leave
they've
me.
heard a million other people speak beforehand, and I'm
Yep.
like, I need some excitement when I get up
But
there.
you have such great energy and presence. You brought us all back in.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So you're also a fellow hat lady.
I am a big fan of hats.
So common misconception, it's not that we just sought out we loved hats.
You're going to share all of our dirty secrets
I'm
right
sharing
now.
all of our dirty secrets. So y'all, I have 95% gray hair. I look like a total skunk 10 days after my hair is colored. So for 10 days, I have no hat on. And for 10 days, I'm wearing a hat to cover up my gray hair. And Katie was just sharing with me. She's like, I don't want to wash my hair every day.
Yeah. That's how it all started. So I switched jobs and I started working for Starwood Hotels and Resorts. And I thought, new job, new me. I can be whoever I want to be because these people don't know me.
They don't know
so
you.
Maybe I'm Katie who wears a red lip and a hat. And really the hat started to be worn because I didn't want to wash my hair every day and it was a little bit greasy. And this was before, dry shampoo and everything that we have today. So I started wearing hats, but I just genuinely love hats now.
Well, yeah, and then you get used to wearing it. And you're like, this is kind of cute.
Yeah.
It's like an extra accessory for my outfit.
Yeah, there was a woman I used to work with. She now leads luxury and lifestyle brands for Hyatt. And she's like, when I first saw you, I was like, who is this girl in the hat? Who does she think she is? And I'm like, I'm just over here with my dirty hair. So
I love that. Yeah, me, I'm just over here with my gray hair being hidden, and that's really why I like that. Okay, so let's dive in a little bit. When you first came in the room, you told me about this concept of buying your second home first.
I love that. Thank you.
I want to hear about that because I think this is something that people don't think about.
Yes.
They think where I live is too expensive.
Yes.
I can't do this.
Yes.
So talk me through this concept.
Amazing. I live in New York City, obviously one of the most expensive real estate markets in the world. I had been living in London for about 6 years. My husband and I and our daughter, we moved back to the city. Unfortunately, my mom is really sick, so I wanted to be closer to her. So we said, okay, we'll go back to the city and we'll figure out what's next for us. So even if we could figure out how to afford in New York City, we didn't know if we'd want to. We didn't know how long we're going to be there for. And realistically, we could not afford it. So what we did was we bought our second home, really the first real estate purchase that we had made in the U.S., a house in upstate New York near Lake George, a place that we used to go camping that we absolutely love, really, really special.
Yeah.
And we thought this would be great for our family. But you know what? I come from a hotel background. So maybe I could list it on Airbnb. Maybe I can list it on Vrbo. And maybe we could cover some of our costs. But of course, I'm like a planner. And I'm like, okay, if I never have one guest come through, can I afford this mortgage payment? And I could. So that gave me the confidence to do it. And then as I got started, very quickly, I thought, wow, this is a whole world I never thought of before. Not only was it covering my entire yearly costs, but then I was making a small profit on it as well.
Yeah.
And that was just my first year. So within a year, we ended up buying a second place.
Okay.
Doing that again.
How long ago was this?
This is all only 2 years ago.
Okay.
So February 2023, we closed. on our first place, and February 2024 we closed on our second place.
Okay, so first of all, congratulations, because
Thank
lots of
you.
people think like, ooh, I want a vacation home, and they never do anything about it.
This is exactly it. So where I'm from, a place called Hicksville.
Okay.
Legitimately, it's on Long Island. And the narrative I had growing up when someone had a lake house or a second home was must be nice.
Yeah.
That was very common. And I really am allergic to that saying now because it's lazy.
It's so, and it makes me mad because you're like, do you know how hard I had to work for this? Must be nice. It's not like I
Exactly.
won the lottery, y'all. It's
Exactly.
not like I married a prince.
Oh, that would be nice. Would it actually? Never mind.
Probably
I
not.
spent too
There
much
would
time in the UK. It wouldn't be
there
so
would
nice.
Lots of rules and lots of control, and would not fit our personality
That's true.
types
That's
very
true.
well.
And the ankle cross seems like it gets difficult. But anyway.
Yeah, I don't think we're quite.
But yeah, it's like
reserved
you
enough for
had
that.
a lot of sacrifice
Yes.
to make that choice and continual sacrifice
Yes.
to continue to making that choice. So I'm really passionate about showing people like you can have a second home, you can have a vacation home because of this democratization of the short-term rental world and industry. If you do it right, which that's a, bigger question mark of like, you actually have to take care of the guests and, want to make sure that they're having an incredible experience.
So tell me about how you paid for this first one.
So for the first one, that we had just a bunch of savings that we had been working on and thinking one day we'll buy a house maybe, but it was a laughable amount for New York City.
And did you get a traditional loan?
Traditional loan. Yep.
Were you able to get a vacation 10% down?
10%.
kind of
I think
thing?
we did 10.5% to be able to alleviate PMI.
Okay.
So we were able to do that. And then, like I said, I factored in the numbers into like our monthly expenses and
And
thought
how many hours is this from where you live?
3.5.
So it's drivable in a day.
Drivable in a day.
There and back, even if you had to.
Yep. But also far enough that I had to put the systems in place to not
Especially
be
as a
the
mom.
person who, yes,
Yes.
exactly.
Okay, so with this hotel background that you've had, how do you bring those skills into running something like an Airbnb?
Yeah.
Because I hear all of the people who bought Airbnbs a few years ago, they have these dreams now of like, I want to have a boutique hotel, I want to have this, I want to have that.
That's me.
Yeah, right? That's like the new trendy thing, right?
Yep.
But for you, it's not a new trendy thing because you worked in that industry.
I worked for the big guys though. So I worked for Starwood Hotels and Resorts and I worked for Marriott International.
So you got to see the good things that you want to bring
Yes.
with you and the
Yes.
bad things that you don't.
Well, the bad things is they are huge.
Yeah.
So they are slow, right?
Yeah.
But because they have to be. They
And the
have
red tape.
shareholders, money,
Yep.
and they need to be intentional about what they're doing, and they do an amazing job of that. But like you said, I learned the services, the standards.
So let's dig into that.
Yeah.
Talk to me about some of those things you're bringing with you.
Yeah.
Because I remember I did this with my RV park staff. I, for some reason, got this wild idea. I wanted an MBA. I have no idea why, because I totally don't need one. And I think it's because I just really enjoy learning. And it was before all the Instagram gurus started teaching you stuff. And so,
Right.
like, you're like, well, what do you do? Like, okay, I'll get an MBA.
Right.
So in one of the classes, there was this case study of the Ritz-Carlton. And they were talking about, like, their standards of service and how
Yes.
they train their employees. And I got to thinking about it. And most of my employees at an RV park had never experienced this level of service.
Sure, most people don't,
Right.
right?
They haven't stayed at a Ritz-Carlton. They have not eaten at a super fancy restaurant.
Yeah.
So I was like, what is the nicest restaurant in town that is going to treat somebody like that? And the nicest restaurant in that area was like a Fleming's. And while they do not like match the Ritz-Carlton, it's still a different level of service.
Yeah.
So I took my whole RV park staff out, which is like a total like mix of people, right? And I'm like, we are eating at Fleming's. So
Yeah.
y'all can see what I mean
Yeah.
by like a level of service that
Yes.
I want us to start understanding.
Yeah.
So talk to me about those things that you are bringing into your Airbnb business now.
Yeah, it's really funny. I just had Steve Turk on my podcast, and he is an amazing hospitality expert. And he was talking about how he took his family recently to a cheesecake factory, and everything that server did in that experience had that same Forbes 5-star level of service. Did you check in with me? Did you feed the kids first? Did you ask if I wanted another drink? All of those little things. So it doesn't have to be at that super high price point. Now, Ritz-Carlton, of course, has literally written the book on this. They do have a standards book out there, and they're able to over deliver because of the price per night that they're able to
Of
charge.
course.
But
Yep.
they do a few things. So one thing is they have a credo. So it's this little mantra, a couple of sentences long. They print it out on a physical card, laminate it, give it to every single hotel employee and every single corporate employee as well. And most hotels have something called lineup meeting every morning, probably similar to what you do in the RV park, where you get everybody together and you kind of say like, here's who's checking in today, here's what events are happening, here's what VIPs we have in house, just get everybody on the same page. with Ritz-Carlton, they end that meeting by reciting their credo.
Do you know this credo?
I used to know it by heart. I don't know it
We're
anymore.
totally going to have to look this up.
We do, and you can absolutely find it. It says something about we are ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. And I love that too, because it's like we are on the same page. It's not a subservient type of thing, but we are here to really empower that experience.
Okay, and so I think that's important to point out because some people, for some reason in our culture, have gotten this idea that like opening a door for somebody or being really nice to them means you're this servant or below.
No.
And some of it also is like genuine people skills.
Just people
It's
skills.
okay to be
Yes,
nice.
yes.
That does not mean you're less than
And it's
because
so much
you were
more
nice.
fun.
Yes, for everybody.
Everyone.
On both sides.
Yes.
Okay, so we like the credo.
Yes.
What else
like
are
the
we
credo.
taking away?
They also have a kitty of money for every guest that comes in that they can use to overperform. So, when you ask them, perfect example, I was flying here, I was in JFK, I went to go to a restaurant and they were like, we're not open yet. And I was like, oh, can I sit down? And they're like, we don't seat it till 11:30. And like, there were other people sitting there.
Nothing for you to sit down.
I didn't even want them to bring me water. I just wanted to sit there so that in 20 minutes when they did open, I could order. It's an airport. I'm going to be quick, right?
Yeah.
And it's those little things where it's like, why do you need permission or why do you have to follow these rules that were set not with this exact moment in mind? And so that little pot of money empowers the associates to think as individuals and really think, oh, Heather's here.
And is this a per dollar amount for each customer?
I think it's something like up to $2,000 per guest they're able to. It doesn't mean they're going to spend that every single time. But if you're traveling into the city and you mention when you're checking in, like, my daughter and I are here to see the ballet, like maybe they'll leave you like a pair of signed ballet slippers from one of the ballerinas. Or for me, it's something so small and so simple, but when I was living in the UK, I was traveling a ton, and everywhere I would go, I would get a postcard to write to my nephews back in New Jersey. Wanted to instill that love of wanderlust to them as well. Put a little fun fact on there so it was educational. And any hotel I would stay at, I would bring the postcard to the front desk, and it kind of became my little test of just saying, could you mail this for me? And you would get varying responses, which would be, yeah, if you go get a stamp, or yeah, we'll charge you for the stamp, or the mailbox is down the road, anything like that. But always at a Ritz-Carlton, it was, yeah, no problem. And I imagine they used, $1 or $2 of that kitty for me to buy a stamp for it. So just the little things.
So how will you use that in your short-term rental?
Oh man, well, I don't have a kitty for each of my guests, unfortunately, but I think it's just that personalization. So from the time my guests book, I have a pre-written message to them, but I always read it before I hit send. I know a lot of people love technology and automation, and I only have 2 properties. So I am at a smaller scale where I'm able to be a bit more intentional and personal, but I want to read it because in my message, it says, what brings you to town? And one of my properties is in Saratoga Springs, which has the oldest horse racing course in the U.S. If they're traveling during the big Belmont Stakes weekend or what have you,
what brings them to town.
I would look like a fool.
Yeah.
Like I'm supposed to be your host.
Or maybe they told you that already.
Or
in
maybe
the
they
communication.
said it. Exactly. So I really want to be specific about that. And then I try to just say, do you need any recommendations? Have you been here before? What brings you to town? And then I think of it like a hotel, which is they don't have to respond to me. I see a lot of hosts being like, they haven't even told me why they're here. I don't know. I think I'm going to cancel on them. Like, well, if the Ritz-Carlton sent you a confirmation email, you don't have to respond and justify your stay.
Yeah.
So I think about that as well. But then I'm also like, I'm here if you need me. I'm kind of like the concierge, right? I'm not going to call and make your dinner bookings for you, but I'm going to recommend places specific to you. And you are different than the other guests. If you've told me you're traveling with young children versus if you're traveling with elderly parents or something like that, I can really tailor the recommendations that I have. It doesn't take me that much time. I keep a Google Doc of anything I've recommended. If I've had a second time someone say that they have celiac disease in their family, I have a whole gluten-free suggestion list already ready to go. So it doesn't take me too much more time, but before the person even arrives, they feel like I took care of them.
So what do you say to the host who says, I don't have time for that? This is a business. I shouldn't have to personalize this stuff. Because you hear that.
It's a business, so you should, I would say. I think I said this to a friend of mine who purchased an amazing house in the Hamptons, and he really didn't like the hosting part of it. He wanted the revenue, but he didn't want to deal with the guests. And that's totally fine. That's why there's management companies, and that's why there's co-hosts. But really, our business is hospitality. That's it. That's it. It's taking care of people.
Listen, y'all, I know today's episode is inspiring, but inspiration alone will never carry us to our ultimate goals. That's why I started the Society of Entrepreneurial Women. It's a mastermind for high-performing female investors and entrepreneurs who are living their lives unapologetically. In a world where most people don't get us, or they try to keep us confined in a small box, the Society exists to turn off the brakes and set you free. We have weekly calls covering investing, wealth building, health, relationships, family, and a whole lot more. We have small tribes to hold each other accountable to our goals. We have in-person, ladies-only retreats to disconnect and drive each other towards our dreams. And most importantly, this is a community where you can be unapologetically you. Celebrate your wins, scream your successes from the top of the rooftop, become best friends with women who get you. We're 3 years in, and I can honestly say my best friends today are all from the Society. Click the link in the show notes to learn more. I think that it's so important to fall in love with part of the process.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've talked about this on every episode. And if you can't fall in love with some aspect of the process, it is not the thing you should be doing.
Completely agree. And people can be difficult. It doesn't mean every guest interaction I have is great. But when you really start to get to know people, it's so special what we get to do. I had a girl sending me pictures of her and all of her best friends because she spent her bachelorette party there. She's going to remember that weekend forever. My house gets to be a part of that for her. That's so great. So I think, like you said, falling in love with the fact that I get to deliver these experiences. And then, oh, by the way, I have a beautiful place that my family and I can go and enjoy as well. So it's a win-win to me.
So changing gears just a little bit, you and I are both speakers at a conference that we're at, and today you're going to be speaking on PR and branding.
Yeah.
This is a huge thing right now.
Yeah.
Maybe not even right now. This is always a huge thing, but it's been more public because of the increase in social media usage since COVID.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about that. How did you become the person to talk about that? And what are some tips that you could give us?
Yeah. So I started my career working in the fashion industry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I was studying under a fashion merchandising major. I thought I was going to be a trend forecaster, which probably shows how old I am because the internet is here and nobody needs somebody to travel and tell you what's going to be cool in 6 months. The internet can just tell us that. So glad that didn't work out for me. But I had applied for an internship at Michael Kors, the fashion designer.
Okay.
And I got called for an interview and I went into the city and they said, which department do you want to intern with? And I said, anything but design. Like, I can't draw, so you tell me where I could fit. And they interviewed me for a few departments, and it was the PR team that offered it to me. I had never heard of PR before. I had no idea what PR did. But through this internship, and then I ended up staying on and freelancing with them, and then I ended up getting an assistant role eventually, I fell in love with PR. And really how I think about it is, how do you represent yourself or your brand to your customers through the media? This is an earned platform. You can't control the exact language that's going to be used like you can in marketing or on owned channels like social media. But it's that much more important to your guest or to your customer because they're saying a journalist feels this way about your brand, therefore it's got to be true, versus we're also smart to marketing collateral now to say, well, the brand says that, but who knows if it's real.
Yeah. Okay. And so you have this internship, you
Yeah.
end up staying on at
Yep.
this job, and talk to me about how those kinds of things are relevant today for
Yeah.
your business.
What was fascinating was when I joined the company as like a full-time employee, as an assistant to the SVP of global image, or fashion director was her title, I think, at the time. The company had made a really intentional shift, and that was they were no longer going to be a domestic wholesaler. They were going to be an international retailer. And we also went from being a privately held organization through an IPO to become a publicly traded organization. So how you communicate in both of those situations are completely different. So we started to expand into different markets. And I got to build the entire international communications team, which started with a PR agency in Canada and one woman in Italy. And by the time I left, we had 25 global offices with some PR teams as big as 10 people in these countries around the world. I will never forget when we launched into China. Michael had been a designer for 20, 30 years at that point. He had been a designer for Celine for a minute as well. And then obviously due to his notoriety, he became a judge on Project Runway, which really just shot him into superstardom. When we launched into China, they thought he was a designer, because he had been a judge on Project Runway. So the way you communicate the brand story there, because of where they are in the branding cycle, is totally different than how you speak to the American consumer.
Who knew him before Project
Who knew him
Runway.
before and like gets his story and understands him. But you need them to be cohesive, right? Because the brand should look, feel, smell the same, even if you're at a different part of your story.
Okay. And so talk to us about how that translates to our audience, which is going to be this entrepreneurial woman. Lots of them own real estate and businesses. And clearly we are not at the same level as Michael Kors. And we're all
Me neither.
And most of us do not have the access to, much less a full-time PR person. We don't even know like where to start.
Yeah.
So if somebody, I see that you are a writer for, you have articles in Entrepreneur Magazine and a lot of other amazing places. How do they get in these magazines? How are they getting this public relations access that some other people have?
It's a great question. A lot of what I'll talk about today, actually, too. First, I think it's really important to think about, like, what do you want to be known for? And I like to think about key messages. So you should always have 3 key messages. It's great for a job interview. It's great for an actual interview. It's great for Christmas with the family. What are you going to talk about? What are the things that you want people to walk away thinking or knowing about you? Once you know that, you can be a bit of a copycat. Look at either properties or people who are getting coverage that you feel that like little tingle of envy over. And I don't mean envy in a bad way. I mean envy in the way that like is leading us to what we want, is kind of showing us internally what we're here for, right? And I think if you look at another person and you're like, they're getting covered by this article or this journalist or what have you, why not reach out to them and say, hey, do you want to cover me too? Or you want to do a separate piece, right? The focus there really needs to be personalization. Media staffs are just being really cut down, but the need for content and the focus that they're being asked for. They're being asked for more articles than ever, yet they have less people on staff. So how can we make their job easy? And I think everyone can think about what is their little superpower. I love writing, and I had been on the opposite side of the desk for so long, being the one to pitch the journalists to say, write about my brand, my person, whatever it might be, that I thought, I can do this too. So now instead of pitching a journalist, I reach out to the editor there and say, what if I write this story for you? And I want it to be really specific to that editor and to that publication. So the first time I reached out to Entrepreneur, I wanted to write a piece because I was about to launch my podcast. And I thought we could do a really cool piece about the five podcasters and the information they wish they knew before they started a podcast. And I had done my research and thought Entrepreneur would be a perfect home for that because of other articles that they had done. So I reached out. I said, what if I write this article for you? Here are the people that would be in the story. Here's the types of advice that they would give. And by the way, here are 3 articles that you guys had on your website that were high performing that I think these would be similar to. All of a sudden, the journalist is going to go, yeah, that's easy. That means I've got another piece of content that I don't have to worry about writing for. And yeah, go ahead. By the second time I reached out to them, I had an idea for a story, pitched it, he agreed to it, I submitted it, and I made sure to follow, like, I asked him, what format? Do you want Google Doc? Like, how can I make it easy for you? And after that second piece, he came back to me and he said, it's so easy to edit your pieces. Feel free to pitch me anytime.
Okay, so what I'm not sure that you're noticing is the trend in all of this. The writing portion of this also includes you going above and beyond, just like the skills you learned from the Ritz-Carlton.
You're right.
It's literally that.
Yeah.
You are putting it together with a bow on it for them so that it is easy and it has everything that they need. Mm-hmm. And those skills have transferred into that aspect of your life too.
Yeah, that's very nice. Though I should share my very first time doing freelance writing, I had pitched a story to the Every Mom that I thought would be great. My daughter was like under a year at the time. She had really chunky thighs, and the amount of times people would comment on them, I just thought, are we like body shaming at 9 months old? Is this when it starts?
What kind of comments were they giving you?
Oh, like, looks like she likes her milk, or like, oh, look at those thighs. Just like so many comments that I was like, why are we talking about her body? Just say she's cute.
I have a 10-month-old, and I do love her chunky legs.
But you're the mom. You're allowed to.
But I'm also not like thinking she's eating too much or anything like that. I think it's like this sweet baby phase.
Absolutely.
Where they have that little chunky body.
Yes, absolutely. But why should a stranger be commenting on my daughter's body shape? So that was my idea for the story. I reached out to an editor at Every Mom and I said, I'd like to write this story for you. And, I can interview some experts, like potentially these people, to get their take on, like, is this bad or am I overreacting?
Yeah.
Right? And I didn't hear anything for 6 months. And so I thought to myself, they're laughing at me. And they're thinking, this girl thinks she could write. She's not a real writer.
And they probably missed your email.
They missed my email. They don't care. They don't care about me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So 6 months later, the editor finally saw the email and said, we love this. If you haven't placed it anywhere yet, we'd love to have it. And then from that article came like 10 more articles.
Okay, wait. No, I want to hear about the article. So you asked the experts.
I did.
And what did they say?
Just that, like, people really should stop talking about everybody else's bodies. Yeah. And it starts, unfortunately, for girls even younger than it does for boys. That's what their research showed.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder how we got there.
I don't know.
And how we get away from it.
I don't know how we get away from it. That's a better question. You're right.
Yeah, because I truly don't think that men have this issue. But even my last guest and I were talking about, as moms, after the end of the pregnancy, regardless if you're huge or not, you feel huge.
Huge. I feel it right now.
And you feel like you're not in your own body.
Yep.
How many months pregnant are you?
7.5.
And at that point, like you said, your swelling starting.
Oh, yes.
None
I
of your
am
stuff
cute
fits,
right now.
even some of your maternity clothes.
Yep.
Shoes don't fit.
Yep.
Don't want to wear closed-toed shoes. You feel like you have Shrek feet.
And lucky for me, this is the first time I get to see so many people I know virtually in person. What a great first impression.
Right? But for some reason, we aren't celebrating those like moms' bodies.
I know.
We're like super insecure in one of these moments that should be one of the happiest of our lives.
Yeah.
We
We
feel
brought
like,
life into
oh
the
my
world.
God, I'm fat.
But don't worry, the dad bod, that's getting all the press. Everyone
Exactly.
loves a dad bod.
And they think it's cool.
I know.
And we're supposed to have abs.
I know.
And so, because even after you birth the baby, you still freaking look pregnant.
Yeah.
And
for
it
a
takes,
while.
and you have to work really hard. And
Yeah.
it takes months.
Yep.
And then you're pregnant again.
Yep.
We start all over. I literally, and my husband wants more kids. And I'm like, I don't want to lose baby weight again. I'm still losing baby weight. I've
Yeah.
lost like 15 pounds. I have like 30 more to go.
Yeah.
I am tired of losing baby weight.
This is how I felt. But my daughter is about to be 3, and I knew that I wanted to have a second, and I was like, I have no motivation to like get back in shape, to then get out of shape, to then get back in shape. I was like, I'll just wait.
It's crazy. And I don't know why they like pick on our bodies so much. I don't know where that came from.
I don't know. And like you said, like now that I'm a mom, I'm like, this is an actual miracle. Like the fact that she's here and is such a person and has such a personality and everything. Like, you're right. We should be celebrating it.
I saw this meme one time that was a lady and you could see her stretch marks.
Mm-hmm.
And she talked about how she's learned to think of it as being a tiger who's earned her stripes.
I love that.
And I try really hard to feel that way about my stretch marks.
That's hard.
I don't know that I feel that way about them, though.
I think that's a lovely PR spin.
I agree with that.
You know?
That is like the definition of that, right?
Totally.
Because you're not going to get that body back.
No.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
But we have to somehow get to a point to where, and it probably starts with women like us making conscious decisions to be nicer to women who are in that situation.
Exactly. And celebrate each other for it and share the vulnerabilities
Because
of like,
there's a million pregnant women at this conference we're
I
at.
know. Isn't
and
that nice?
they genuinely look adorable.
I know, but isn't it so wonderful that it's like a community where it's like just come how you are and celebrating families and women in every stage of their life.
Yes, I even saw a baby. Did you see the
Oh, yeah.
baby?
Mhm.
She was adorable.
She's presenting today, she said, and I was like,
What?
are you going to bring him on
What?
stage?
What
And
is
she's
she-
like, should I? I was like, yeah, that's guaranteed applause right there.
Yes, that's amazing. Okay, that's awesome. I
Yeah.
love that. So you're also on this journey of writing a book.
Yes.
And as I know, you get a lot of no's
Yes.
before you ever get a yes.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about that journey.
It is hard, and I don't want to sugarcoat it and say, like, let me give you my PR spin, which I will give you next, but it's hard, period, full stop. It's really hard, and every time you think it's me. And especially a lot of the rejection that I hear is around platform. So, who knows exactly what that means, but is it you don't have enough social media following or what have you? My background is publicity. So I know that you want to capitalize on getting coverage when you have something to sell. So it's a bit of a chicken and an egg situation where they want the coverage. And I'm like, but we got to hold it because media will say that's been covered already. We've already done that when you didn't have anything to sell. So that's tricky. The PR spin that I tell myself is every no is one step closer to a yes. And what I believe more than ever is at least if you're being rejected, you're trying something. So it feels really crappy when somebody tells you no, but at least in the back of my head, I'm like, I tried. And that's kind of how I've always been, even when I was growing up. I'd rather try my best at something and fail because I can let myself off the hook. I'm like, I did my best. They didn't want me. That's okay. That's no big deal.
That wasn't for me anyway.
Really? Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yes.
But if you didn't try your best or if you didn't try in the first place, then you always wonder. And that's way worse to me is the always wondering bit.
I love that. That's a really good way
to look
like
at everything that you've built, right?
Yes.
And
there's definitely stuff that doesn't work. And you decide, and sometimes it's not a no, it's a not right now, right? If we're going to spend that with our PR language.
Exactly.
That is, even though that's like a thing to say, it's very true.
It's true. It's absolutely true.
And sometimes those no's come back.
Yeah.
Kind of like your article that was buried.
Exactly.
And turn into yeses.
Yes. And now I know so much more too. This is the third book that I've tried to have traditionally published. And each time I know so much more. And one day I'll probably be the story of the person who's like, she's 75 years old and she finally published her first book, But I'd rather be that person than the person who's like, yeah, I just started writing a newsletter and all of a sudden an agent approached me and I just got a book deal. I mean, I would really kind of like to be that person. But
okay, here's the thing though, because everyone's like, I want to blow up overnight on social media. I want to wake up to that 5 million followers.
Yes.
Here's the thing. If you wake up to 5 million followers, you have no idea how to treat those 5 million followers.
That's so true.
If you are the one who wakes up to the book deal, you don't know how to write the book.
Yeah.
You don't know how the industry works.
Yep.
You don't know any of the things you're learning. And the same thing works with blowing up on social media. You have to learn to get good at content. Yeah. You have to learn to engage with your audience. You have to respond to those comments and those DMs. And that is a process. Yeah. And it takes time to learn those things. And so I heard my preacher say one time, when you give somebody something like that, you're robbing them of their blessing.
Yeah.
And if you all of a sudden just get something like that, the things that you go through along the way are what turn you into who you become.
Absolutely.
And you will miss out on that.
I think of that with my properties, full stop. We bought the first place in Lake George and I was terrified. And like I said, I thought if it doesn't work, it's okay because I can cover it. Then we bought the second place and it was less than a year later. We were sitting at the first place and I told my dad, yeah, we just made an offer on this other house and I just found out it got accepted. He could not look me in the eye. He was shaking his head as if I had told him I had done this horrible thing. And he just said, I'm so worried you're going to overextend yourself. And because I'm not from a world of people who do these types of things, his words really mattered to me. And I started panicking even more, thinking, is this the wrong idea? Is this crazy? And then once we launched that property and I saw how it started to work again, I thought, I needed to trust myself and I knew what I was doing. And then I was talking
That gives you confidence though, and decision-making skills and the ability to make quick decisions that you're going to have to learn as you grow in that real estate investing journey and entrepreneurship.
And you talked about the obsession with boutique hotels now. I am one of those people. And just a few months ago, it seemed like a crazy idea because the cost of commercial real estate is going to be much more than a single family home. It is, yeah. And also, who am I? What do I know about buying commercial real estate or doing all of these things? So much like yourself, I said, I'm going to go back to school. I signed up for a certificate program through Cornell because they have one of the best hotel schools in the world, commercial valuation. I'm in the middle of it right now. And very quickly, you start to realize people do this all the time.
People do this
all the time. And guess what? They don't have the money either.
Also, people who are not as smart as you are.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you meet them and you're like, bro, they can do that. I can do this.
Exactly. I mean, most of the time, right? Except for this conference. All these women are amazing. But a lot of times it's like, well, if I just try hard and figure it out, I can figure it out.
Ladies, it's time to redefine the conference experience with the Society of Entrepreneurial Women Retreats. Step inside a world tailored for women just like you, where you can lead, learn, and unwind in style. Our retreats offer everything from insightful investing sessions to fun activities like salsa dancing, boat cruises, food tours, and so much more, ensuring you come back not just inspired, but truly refreshed. Join a community that celebrates you wholly and supports your every endeavor. Ready for a retreat that changes the game? Visit the link in our show notes and find out how you can be part of this exclusive experience. Okay, so I'm curious, how did you leave the world you were in?
Oh my gosh.
To transition to this one?
Oh, so sadly, to be honest with you, COVID happened.
Yep.
And obviously I did a lot of work on crisis communication. So we were focused on closing hotels, turning hotels into hospitals.
Okay, wait, so we went from Michael Kors to the hotel industry.
So Michael Kors, then I worked for a year at a company called Birchbox, which was like a tech beauty startup. I worked with their founders. I had built the international communications team at Michael Kors. Birchbox had done an international acquisition, which overnight gave them presence in the UK, France, Spain, and Canada.
Which is why you lived internationally.
Well, no, actually. So I was still living in New York at the time, but I was there to really set up their international communications team. It was incredible. Their founders are just the most amazing, impressive women. But really what I saw when I left Michael Kors was I loved working with all of my international teams. I didn't love fashion. I like getting dressed. I really care about presentation and whatnot, but that industry wasn't what was making me excited. It was working with the international teams, traveling to all these places. And I thought to myself, wait, if I could do PR in the travel industry, now that could be really exciting. But at the time, I went to work for Birchbox for a year because any of the traditional hotel companies I would interview with or the airlines, they would all say, but you don't have hotel experience. And I'd say, yes, but I read all the trade publications in my free time. And actually, people aren't just thinking about booking trips when they're only reading the travel publications. So I could bring a really creative mind to like, how do you get exposure in fashion? And how do you get exposure in other places? And I had all my great PR answers. And it still was a no. So I went to Birchbox for a year. And then Starwood Hotels and Resorts opened up a role looking after global PR for W Hotels and Le Méridien, my absolute dream job because I was a W obsessed person. And I went for that interview and I remember having my answer of like, why me? And even though I'm not coming from travel, and the hiring manager kind of stopped me and was like, no, we like that you come from a different background. We like to have varying viewpoints here. And they really saw it as a strength.
Man, I can even feel that, like how good that feels
Yeah.
for somebody to be like, no, you're exactly what we need.
Exactly.
Especially after all those no's.
And being so young at the time, like now I'm very confident and like, if I'm not a fit, then like you said, it's not a fit.
Yeah,
right?
whatever.
That's
It's
no
fine.
big deal. But to hear it's like, oh, I was right all along. And actually, you know, when Marriott acquired Starwood, the number one thing they said is we were exclusively watching you guys in marketing and comms. Marriott was amazing and still is amazing at operations, but Starwood was amazing at branding and PR and storytelling. And so that's why, because they brought in people from all different viewpoints and they didn't just do things by the book.
So you move into this new role.
Move into the new role. It is even better than you can imagine. One of my first trips was flying to Nice and then being taken via helicopter to Monaco for a team meeting. I mean, it's just, and staying in the best hotels in the world and being treated incredibly. It was amazing.
So how did you end up moving
to London?
To Europe?
One
Europe?
morning
London?
we woke.
Is London Europe?
Yeah.
London's Europe?
Well, Brexit would say no, but yes. One morning in New York, we woke up to an email from our then CEO saying he was stepping down and that the company was exploring alternative options, which essentially meant it was for sale.
Yeah.
And after a kind of drawn out process and it being a few different contenders, Marriott bought the company. So we went through this big acquisition process, and honestly, it was scary and it was sad because you saw like a lot of amazingly talented humans leaving the business, a lot of the senior level especially. But it was exciting too because I'm a hotel nerd, so I'm like inside for one of the biggest M&A deals of the history of hotels, really. And I was lucky enough to get a job looking after global PR for all of the luxury brands after that. So it became 8 luxury brands, including Ritz-Carlton, and they had Edition and Bulgari. And at that time, I knew my goal was to move to the UK. I had studied abroad there. I just loved it. I had gotten...
Were you married yet?
I was about to be married. So I was
And you're
3 months from
And you're
from
like,
my wedding.
husband, can we move to Europe?
So
I'm going whether you are or not.
I reached out to the hiring manager in the UK and said, look, you're hiring for this job, which is essentially my equivalent on the EMEA team that I was for the global team. Would you consider me? I have dual citizenship with Ireland, so I don't need to be sponsored. I didn't tell my husband I was doing that. And only once she said yes and the process started going, did I tell him. And then I got offered the job. And I said to him, I'm so happy in New York. Our life is fantastic. We don't need to take this job. I am fine to say no. And in the back of my head, I thought, if you say no, I will call this wedding off. Genuinely.
Does he know that now?
Oh, of course he does.
Okay.
Of course he does. I didn't want him to feel backed into a corner.
Yeah.
But I thought, if you know anything about me, this is my number one goal in life.
Yeah.
And I have set it up that he didn't need sponsorship to get a new job because of my citizenship. We had a dog. I figured out how to get our dog over there without him leaving our side. I figured out everything.
And so you had your first baby there.
And I had my first baby there.
Okay.
Yeah. So luckily he said yes to moving.
Luckily he said yes to
12
moving.
days after our wedding, we moved.
Shut up.
Yep.
Okay, so you move across the ocean
Yes.
and you've got this new job.
Yes.
This sounds amazing, but how did you end up leaving this?
So first of all, we're living two different lives, me and my husband. I am like frolicking down the streets, like life is so great. Look at
In
this
your cute
building.
hat.
I'm in my hats, like I'm with my hat people. And he's just like, it's raining and it's miserable and I hate it here. But then eventually he got on board and he loved it and everything. But I worked for the company for many years until COVID happened. They did a big reduction in workforce. So I was very lucky that they only brought me down to 3 days a week. They got rid of a lot of people, furloughed a lot of people because no one was traveling. None of our hotels were open, so we weren't making any money. But really what I saw is that it was changing the way we would do PR for the foreseeable future for the organization. It was really offer driven, book now and get extra Bonvoy points or book now and get 20% off your stay. It just wasn't really creatively challenging for me anymore. So a woman who I used to work with on W Hotels, she had become the CMO of a new luxury cruise line that was starting. So she asked me to come and launch that with her from the PR perspective.
Okay, so I have to admit, you have had a really fun career path.
Fun.
From clothes to, it's like every girl's dream, right? From clothes to travel to now cruises and then Airbnbs. This is I think you're in the wrong direction for a book. I think you're trying to write something that doesn't have as big of an audience, and you could totally cater to a lot of women who would think of this as a dream life story.
Honestly, fun was really my guiding light for a long time until right before I had my daughter. Then I started to try to think of it more strategically.
Yeah.
But really that was what I would always ask myself was is this job going to be fun? Am I going to be excited to go to work every day?
That's a huge blessing. Not a lot of people get to say, is this job going to be fun?
Such a privilege.
It's how's this job going to pay?
And it wasn't always like that. My first job was in a bagel store, as every good Long Islander's first job is. I've had some really bad jobs along the way, but I got so lucky that one thing would lead to the next thing would lead to the next thing.
So COVID comes and we're transitioning.
We're launching a cruise line now. That was a lot of fun. But then I started working for a travel technology company. Again, a bit more of a intentional, strategic move. They had a great maternity leave policy. I knew I wanted to have my child. And so we had my daughter, and then unfortunately my mom is very sick. So about 10 months after she was born, we decided to move back to the US. And because we made that move is why we bought our first place and what landed me into this amazing world of short-term rentals.
And are you now a full-time investor?
No, I have a day job, and I just landed a new day job.
You do?
Yes.
Which is?
Working for Airbnb.
Shut up!
Yeah.
You didn't lead with that.
I know. Well, it hasn't started yet, so yes.
What are we going to be doing with Airbnb?
Host communications. So
Okay.
taking my communications background and the fact that I am a super host and an Airbnb lover and putting that together to really share what the company is doing with hosts, and then I assume giving some feedback from the host community back to the company.
Okay, so it's so interesting how all the things we do over the course of our life come together to put you in the place that you're in.
Yeah.
Because all the skills that you've
Yes.
needed from all of those different backgrounds.
Even my most recent position with a travel technology company,
Yeah.
there was a little thought in my head at one point that said, imagine if one day I get to work for Airbnb because I've worked for this technology company.
Wow.
And I just thought that was a dream, and it's still a dream, and I haven't started yet, but I'm very excited.
So if you're going to leave our audience with 3 tips on how to bring in these branding and PR strategies to their real estate business, what would that be?
Decide what you want to be known for and really figure out a way to own that. Make that your key message. And
instead of being for everyone,
be specific. Absolutely. Absolutely. And don't wait for someone to ask you the direct question for that either. So I guess that would be the second piece of advice. You don't need someone to say, what are you known for? Or what is this? Or whatever. You can lead them into that as long as you are intentional about knowing what your message is. And the third thing is you can figure anything out. Honestly, I've had crazy,
Think
terrible.
About how many times you've reinvented yourself.
Yeah, and just I've had terrible landlord moments of septic tanks backing up and all these things that I didn't grow up in a septic tank. I don't know anything about it, but you figure it out. And each time you do it, it reminds me I can figure out anything.
You can literally figure out anything.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. Where can we find more information about you?
Yeah, my podcast is called Sweet Success Podcast. Hopefully you'll be a kind guest on there. I would love to have you on.
Yes, I would love to.
That Instagram is Sweet Success Podcast. It's sweet like hotel suite, so SUITE. And then I'm on Instagram at by Katie Cline, BY Katie with a K, Cline with a C, like Patsy Cline.
Thank you for being here today. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.